More now on our top story, and Sunday night's mass shooting in Las Vegas raises questions yet again about America's gun laws. It happened in the state of Nevada, which has some of the most relaxed gun policies in the U.S. Firearm owners do not have to register with state authorities. Gun sellers carry out background checks, but private sales are allowed to go ahead without checks. Last year, the state voted for mandatory checks, but this wasn't implemented because the FBI wouldn't cooperate. Assault weapons, including automatic and semi-automatic rifles, are legal. Well, let's now speak to Derrick Parks, who is CEO of Metropolitan Protective Services and a former Assistant Chief of Police in Maryland. He's live from Washington, D.C. Very good to have you with us. Tell us first, as far as you're concerned and given your experience, when you heard of this attack in Las Vegas, from a law enforcement perspective, what immediately came to mind?
First thing came to mind was how many casualties, and had they neutralized the threat, and how long did it take them to neutralize the threat?
It took a long time to neutralize the threat, from what we understand, and obviously a lot of questions still need to be answered in this case. I know you currently work with armed and unarmed guards that provide security at several locations, casinos in the Washington, D.C. area. What do you think we should know about the level of complexity in securing a large venue like a casino? And how could this shooter, in this case, have gotten several weapons into his hotel room, knowing that in these Las Vegas casinos, there's always a lot of security? How could this happen?
Well, this is uniquely different because not only was this hotel, not only was it a casino, but it was also a hotel. So it wouldn't have been unusual for an individual to come into the hotel with bags and luggage. That's quite normal, quite common. And even as it relates to him staying in a hotel for 3 to 4 days at a time, that's a usual stay for vacation time, somewhere in the neighborhood between 2 to 5 days. So the things that he had portrayed wouldn't have raised the alarm of the average security or police or law enforcement officials as far as him checking in.
They apparently recovered 17 or 18 firearms from his hotel room. That's quite a lot.
Yes. That is, but if you really think about, you would have to really think about what size were the weapons, what kind of suitcase did he put them in, were they weapon cases, were they just generic suitcases that he was able to break the weapons down, put them in, and just look like a regular traveler, just, enjoying a weekend vacation in Vegas. So I think that, hotel security is not generally on alert to look through people's baggage and things of that nature, like the TSA is when it goes to airports and things like that. Generally, when people come, whether they drive in, they check into their hotel unmolested by security, and they go up to their room, and what they do in their room is particularly their business. So it would have been really a stretch to try to figure out how security would have been a little bit more proactive as it related to knowing what this individual had in his bag.
And of course, Derrick, as you know, with every mass shooting in the U.S., there's always a debate over gun control, gun laws. For our international audience, it's always very difficult to understand why this is such a polarizing issue in the U.S., why the laws are more relaxed in some states like Las Vegas. Ask, why do these things keep happening, and why don't things change as far as gun laws?
Well, I think, the gun debate has been one that you have a huge entity of individuals who really, feel as though it's their right to own weapons, to bear arms. And then you have other ones who feel as though that no one should own guns. So it's something that's completely divided, I think. But what we need to really probably focus on is the mental stability of the individuals. I think if we look at these mass shootings, one thing that seems to stand the common thread is some level of mental instability that eventually is always discovered after the fact.
It's interesting that you bring up the mental stability of the individual, because as you may know, one of the debates right now online and everywhere else is whether this incident was in fact a terrorist act. The shooter is being described as a lone wolf, and many people argue, you know, when it's a lone wolf, when it's a white man who's the attacker, then we want to find out more about his mental stability, his mental health. When it's someone from a different background, from a foreign background, it's more about his affiliations to terrorist groups and so on. We know why this double standard in the U.S.
Well, I think the reason at this particular time, I would just suspect that the investigators that are investigating this is if he's not associated with any other, they can't draw a link between any terrorist organization at this particular time or any kind of religious or a social organization that would have driven him to do something like this. So now they have to peel back the onion and try to figure out what exactly was going on in his head to have caused him to
Do you think if this had been a black man, I'm sorry to ask you this, but if this had been a black man, would the questions have been asked about his mental health, you think?
That's a very good question. I think it's really hard to say. I mean, to be quite honest, I think sometimes there can be a double standard or there can be standards put in place. But realistically, I think it's just the evidence that the investigators have to go off of. And when there's no obvious evidence, they really have to start to investigate in ways that are more clandestine, if you will. So that's when we start looking at mental stability and things of that nature. So I just think that the investigators just have to do their due diligence before we can really kind of call it one thing or the other.
Okay. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Derrick Parks, security expert, joining us there from Washington, D.C. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.